welcome to the Understanding Projects podcast. This is Dave Barrett. My discussion today features Lily Viggiano, a 2013 graduate of the inaugural Bachelor of Public Relations program. She credits the PR program for fine-tuning her relationship building and project management skills. She spent the bulk of her post-college career managing volunteer projects and programs in the nonprofit sector, with the majority involving youth stakeholders. A primary approach is to invest in relationships. The interrelationship of PR and project management is an important one, and we talked about this throughout our discussion. Here is my discussion with Lily Viggiano. In our discussion prior, you have a PR background. You have a diploma and a degree in public relations. And some of our discussion was around the use of PR concepts and skills within your work and within managing projects. And so that's sort of the theme of our discussion. So I wanted to talk to you a little bit about that, in that you've been very involved. Looking at your background, you've been involved in, I think, primarily in youth initiatives and similar types of work. And so tell us a little bit about the use of your PR skills and how that helps you with managing all that work.
Yeah, thanks for having me on today, Dave. Proud graduate of the 2013 class. Got our BA in PR. There is so many skills that I feel like I use on a regular basis in my youth initiatives, volunteer management, event management, and speaking engagements. I feel like taking public relations was a bit of a toolkit, right? So didn't really need to specialize in one thing, but was able to, tactfully pull lots of different skills together. One of the main ones being relationship building. Now, I know we don't take any relationship building classes, but definitely when you think about key messages, know your audience, and being able to say the same thing 100 different ways, you really do start to see how public relations and relationship building do have a huge connection.
What do you mean by, and what do you mean by relationship building? Because I teach, it's refer to it as stakeholder management and so on, but it really is relationship building. It's the same thing, and I often get kind of confusion, like an initial sort of what do you mean by that? And oftentimes it's interpreted as, well, this is how I'm going to communicate with them. I'm going to send them a report and book a meeting, and I see relationship building as so much richer than that. Like, how do you define what is relationship building?
Yeah, so for me, I'd say relationship building isn't just about a transactional relationship, right? Where it's I send you a report, you do this back, and we've come to some sort of work agreement. It actually speaks to something a little bit deeper, right? And I think what people will find as they get into their careers is that we are a network of people, either PR professionals, you're in the nonprofit network, you're in the corporate network. So relationship building isn't just about getting that key stakeholder for one project. It's actually about, building a relationship with Joe, who you might cross paths with him many times throughout your career. And, being able to think of people on that big picture scale while having down to earth conversations and relationships with them. So I feel like a lot of it has to do with, yes, thinking big picture, but being able to be right present with everybody.
Yeah, like I like what you're saying about like just like sending reports back and forth is transactional, and that's probably the lowest level of relationship. Is okay, we're having a transactional relationship. You send me this information, I send you this information back, and we're both happy. That's almost level one. But level 2 or 3 or 4 or whatever is that deeper understanding, like what
it is, right? And I think too don't underestimate how worth it is to invest in your relationships. It makes the job for me every day so much more enjoyable. It makes things happen faster, right? So I'm pretty like, I'm a go-getter. I'm an extrovert. I love getting things done. I have a vision. So when I feel super busy and feel like I need a lot of support, it'd be so easy to just want to try and delegate stuff out. But that's actually when investing in relationships matters so much more, because you're going to need those people to come along with you for the ride. An example would be if you invest in relationships by adding a couple sentences in an email, or, you know, when you're in person, having a little sidebar conversation, it becomes so much easier to say, to pitch an idea, pitch an opportunity, pitch an opportunity to connect through work, instead of feeling like maybe you have to like obligate people, or that it's like you have to strong arm them to get them to collaborate with you. You'll find that you have people who will just say yes, right? So I mean, and that I know it seems kind of transactional to say it that way, but what I'm trying to say is when you have good relationships, things go smoother.
Yeah, no, and it is. You have to be careful when you describe this, because you it can be seen as, or if somebody looks at this negative, there's almost a, okay, you're just being nice to that person to get them to do something, and it's you know,
exactly. It's so scary kind of like chatting about it, but really what it's asking you to do is to see people for who they are, right? And understand who you're working with and how to work with them. There are some people who I can be like very chatty with, and maybe throw some emojis in an email. And there are other people who they would really love it to get a forward of a really cool article that relates to our field, or they want to know about a job opportunity, and that's the way that you build a connection. It's about being smart with your relationships while maintaining your authenticity and your integrity. I'm not putting on any shows to get things to happen at work. This is how I am. So for me, having an interest in relationships is my strength. Maybe relationship building isn't someone's favorite thing to do. So it might feel a little disingenuous. It might feel a little awkward, but it's definitely a muscle that if you keep flexing it, you'll find that you can naturally build connections with people. And it doesn't have to be this negative, manipulative sort of viewpoint, but in fact, it's about, enjoying your space and enjoying the projects that you work on and enjoying being around these people, since you have to be around them anyways.
Yeah, no, I agree completely. And I think for anyone getting into organizations and business is to put that aside, that it's not, you don't do it to be manipulative. And in fact, if you do, people will sense that. They'll start
100%.
to say, okay, you always attach a request to every time you say something nice. There's some request right after, and they'll say, you know what, you're just doing that to get something, and yet if you find yourself thinking that way, that like stop doing that. Is just be, like you said, I think the word authentic, and you just be authentically interested. If you're talking to somebody, you're working with somebody, what do they do? What do they do outside of work? What's their interests? And ask them questions. Like, so many times people don't ask questions about others. They're just there to tell people stuff or to work on a problem. And like you say, it's boring. Like, not boring. I don't mean, didn't quite mean boring, but it can be very transactional and very business oriented. But if you just sort of take a few minutes before the meeting, after the meeting, on the break, whatever, to say, hey, what do you do? What are you interested in? Oh, you like the Blue Jays? Well, so do I. Oh, how are they doing? And then suddenly you have this connection at a human level, and then everything else increases in effectiveness. And it's more fun.
And absolutely. And I mean, especially being a professional in the nonprofit industry, that's half the reason why I'm there, is like, I want to make a change. I want it to be the experience. Like, I'm very much like a hands-on kinesthetic learner. I want to feel it. I'm very passionate about what I do and the topics that I put my effort into. So of course I'm going to be the sort of person that genuinely wants to just grab a coffee with someone I'm working on a project with. Of course I'm going to see someone's strengths and compliment them. Like, of course, that is why I'm here. Maybe it's not like that as much in other industries. I'd have to say it probably is. There's lots of relationship building in every industry, but even more so in the field that I'm in. I'm here because I genuinely want to be, and I'm curious. And there's so much that you can learn from other people by having that curiosity, right? So many interesting stories and things that you just wouldn't even think about if you just take a moment to ask.
Yeah, you are. So your background, as I was sort of, you've alluded to, and I've alluded to, is from what I can see is in nonprofit youth initiatives, coordinating active like youth little projects and initiatives and so on. And so I guess given that, and you can clarify that a little bit more, but what are the challenges of working in that environment? Like, it would seem to me that it would require a lot of influence and coordination and getting diverse groups together. That must be really challenging.
It certainly can be, especially like, for example, this week I've got 6 projects that are taking flight at the same time, right? So everyone's been brainstorming. It's 6 separate groups who meet on either Wednesdays or Thursdays. And they're all going public facing as of last week and this week. So those moments can feel really challenging, because you are not only dealing with the typical aspects of project management, where you want to make sure that the timing is right, that they're using the right tactics, that everyone has done what they've said they've done. But working with a younger audience, teenagers, you also need to recognize school, competing interests. It's a volunteer role. And maybe they've never posted something on Instagram that has to do with a special event. So there's the training component. You have to train folks how to use the tools that you want. You have to really do that. It's not just, okay, we know what tasks we have to do, but here's exactly how to do it. Here are some of the cheat codes that I've learned as a professional that just wouldn't be intuitive or aren't really common sense when approaching some of these, communication projects or event projects that they work on.
Yeah. So how do you like these so you're often working with fairly young people, like teenagers and so on. Like, how do you find, like, what works with them? Like, how do you get them to, like, they're probably, I'm assuming, kind of excited about, like, are you having to motivate them, or are they already motivated and you're just sort of directing them?
Yeah, well, there certainly is not a cookie cutter way to manage youth volunteers. So again, that's where being an astute observer of personalities and an astute observer of how people communicate, whether it's understanding how their body language is reading on a Zoom call, how their texts are being, like, you really have to be agile, to use a project management term. You have to be agile and kind of turn on the side. Like, some groups are highly motivated. They make their own group chats. They might even be in classes together. So sometimes the groups of students know each other. So you've got that accountability. You've got that built-in relationship amongst the group. Other times it's like a disjointed group. They might be all different ages, different leadership styles. So it really takes kind of you have to have like a little bit of a coaching mindset, not just a manager or a coordinator, which is like my job title, but you really have to be a coach and see who's playing today, right? And how can we be really, really reflective of what we've got, and teach them the lessons along the way, right? The lessons of capacity. We might have an idea to change the world, but if there's only 6 of us and only 3 of us come every week, well, hey, our idea of changing the world might have to come a little bit down to earth, because that's all we have.
Right. Yeah, no, I like your you have to be agile in terms of understanding where they are, like, and what their knowledge is, what their motivation is, where they're really at that point, and that it's not cookie cutter. And that applies, I think you could say the same terms, the same thing about almost any team that you inherit or become involved in. You know, these could be, 45-year-olds that are, a group of 40 somethings would be the same. If you were coming in as the coordinator or the manager or the leader, and you'd be saying where they are, where do they know each other, are they motivated, what's their background, how do they work together, like all those things. Those are all things that, your perception skills are key. So is
Yeah,
that some?
and and I agree too. I am on a couple of like collaborative efforts within my current role as well, where I'm in a small network of maybe 6 or 7 people, and we're trying to move the needle on a particular topic, or we're trying to come together to better do wraparound services for particular demographics. And again, that's where my people skills have come into play. So I often will take on the role of admin, but really what it means is I'm communicating and I'm pulling everybody together. And as long as we can get people to show up to the meeting and have a good agenda, with with some wiggle room, then the rest of the collective is able to chime in and put their strengths on the table, and they're able to show up. So I mean, it's exactly the same, just with different ages.
Yeah, you must have an additional challenge though, because it sounds like from just looking at your background that you deal with a lot of volunteers.
Mm-hmm.
How do you like, and so that's like, that could be like, as opposed to, if you were managing employees or contract workers or so on, there's a built-in relationship and understanding of the amount of effort. Like, what do you do to get those volunteers engaged? And because you probably again have a whole range of the ones that are trying to change the world, and some that are there to get their hours for for
Yes.
for volunteer hours. So how do you manage those two, sort of extremes?
Well, I mean, definitely, going virtual posed a lot of challenges and had a lot of really great outcomes as well. So I'll talk a little bit about kind of what I'm currently experiencing. Right. So with going virtual, I found we were much more organized as small projects, right? Because now we were working with technology. Previously, when I was pulling the groups of youth together, we would be in a community space with maybe one computer in a group of 12, group of 15, and we were writing things down on paper, but there was so much relationship stuff happening, right?
Mhm.
So many little pockets of people. They were taking pictures of each other there, making friends. If there was a community event happening, we would just leave the space and go do that instead. And we were really able to immerse ourselves in the community. Bigger groups, lots of relationships. When we went virtual, you lose a lot of that ability to do the sidebar conversations and to pick up on people's body language. And of course, it's not really my style to, force people to have their camera on. You don't know what their situation is. So there's also now the little black screens looking at you too. So you don't have that body language read. So some of the things that I've done to continue to be a good coach is we do lots of breakout rooms. Whenever possible, it's about pairing people up, right? So that no young person is having to do like a task by themselves. It's 2 people, so that regardless of their school schedule, their interests, or if they just straight up like quit or go MIA, we've got 2 or more people working on a certain component. When we first went virtual, we had so much interest in our online events, and like we did silly things and fun things. We painted mugs and lots of team building, but now people are a little zoomed out. So again, having to redefine how do we come together. a final point on that would be is whenever you feel like your team is at its busiest and that there's so much work to be done, those are the days where you have to sit and talk with every single person and
Right.
come together as a group and reinvest in each other.
Right.
So that there is that connection. And I'll tell you, the weeks where we are super busy and I invest like that, invest in conversation, they stay later because they're, you know, they're fully connected, they're fully engaged, camera on or off, doesn't matter. They actually understand their purpose for being there. And, you know, they're doing it as a social activity as opposed to like a homework assignment.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, if you can make them forget that it's a it's a homework assignment and that they want to be there. What I like about what you're saying, and I absolutely agree with, anytime like you're in the process of interacting, whether we call it communicating or, you know, team building or whatever, is there's a constant feedback loop. You're constantly assessing, how's this going? How's this going? Should I course change? Should I course change? Because, you know, if you start to see, you know, whether it's in person or whether it's through a Zoom, people getting a little sleepy or the, you know, the energy level starts to decrease, it's time to change. It's time to maybe the breakout rooms or maybe bring people back together or maybe one-on-one conversations. But that skill or that focus of the, you know, the manager, coordinator, leader, of constantly reading the audience and then readjusting, I think is key. So that's what I was hearing in the way that you were interacting.
For sure. And like, and being able to communicate on several different platforms is just par for the course. I have some groups who communicate on Discord, so I'm hanging out there. We've got Instagram DMs. I'm in Google Drive assigning tasks using the @ feature. Some projects are big enough and disjointed enough that we can use Google Classroom. We meet on Zoom, we email, we text, like I'm everywhere for all the different groups over time. So like you have to be able to like to stay quick with it and to be aware of the tools and how can you use the tools to enhance the experience, right?
Are you going back in person anytime soon, or is that on the horizon, or have you started that already?
Yeah, well, I mean, eventually that would have been the course, but this project is actually, the project I'm working on right now is coming to a close at the end of December. We're actually having our grad event tonight, just to have a little bit of time to celebrate and reflect and have some socializing. But most of the projects, they're public facing now, and then over the course of November, they will all close down. We have one group that has committed to continuing on without the support of like paid staff. And so they've slowly been pulling in teams as the other ones shutter. But that would have been where we were headed, or some sort of hybrid model, right? Is having some groups who meet in person and there are in-person teams, and then having some virtual squads as well. I did try to do some in-person activities though over the course of the summer, safely, of course, but we did lots of litter cleanups and wellness walks and things like that, just again to have that moment to come together,
to actually see each other.
Yeah. Right. I'm like, you guys aren't even getting the real deal with all this Zoom stuff. Like I'm a treat to hang around with. So you know, it's just great to have that energy to connect.
Agreed. In our discussion prior, you talked, I think you said the words speak their language at one point. Tell me about what you mean by that. Like what?
Well, I feel like this would be particularly interesting to PR students, right? We're always thinking about crafting our messages and, you know, making those connections between strategy and action. Like, so this speak your language idea, it works with all the different audiences that you're going to connect with. So, for example, if I'm trying to pitch something to my boss, I want to make sure that I'm speaking her language, that I'm, you know, connecting it to our strategy, connecting it to our vision as an organization. One of the components of our project that we've been talking about a lot is sustainability. So how is the great work that I've done for the last 4 years and that the students have done for 4 years, how is that going to live on? So one of my recent pitches was, okay, in the spirit of sustainability, are we able to pay in advance for some of these resources so that the youth team who's going to continue on once we're done can continue to meet with Zoom and have a pro Canva account and have access to Volunteer Halton? I got the green light for that because I was speaking her language by talking about sustainability and providing the right resources for young people. So it works in all the different ways. Again, and it's not about being phony, but it's about understanding that everyone's going to come to the table with a different agenda. So the more that you're able to show that sense of common ground, it just makes the communication of these ideas run so much smoother.
Yeah, no, I'm a great fan of that. And I try to do it, but also communicate to others and students and so on that, to get out of your own head when you're dealing with others, get out of your own head, your own point of view, and try to look at it from their point of view. What's important to them, and what is their knowledge and so on. Oftentimes people will throw around acronyms because I think either they forget that people don't know those acronyms or it makes them feel important. I'm not sure, but the bottom line is then you're kind of confusing your audience, and it's not a good idea. This takes me back many years, but in my earlier career, I was more in a technical role, like an IT type role. And when you talk to the people that actually run the business, they don't know that stuff. So if you go and start talking about, and many IT people do this, they'll talk about, servers and, and bandwidth and just all kinds of technical terms. And if you don't talk in the language of your customer or client, that it doesn't work well. You don't build the relationship. You don't increase the communication. So I'm a great fan of speaking their language, of just, trying to figure out where they are and try to bridge that. It's such a good idea.
Absolutely. And kind of building off of that too, is just the power of plain language, right? So working with youth has absolutely trained me in plain language. So when you're sending out messages on a broader scale, just keeping in mind that, people don't know your acronyms, or they might not be up to date with that. And there's so many other factors as well. Speaking in plain language makes your message accessible to people of all sorts of backgrounds, right? Whether it's English language learners, people with various learning disabilities, young people. Like if you're trying to reach diverse audiences and you want to have inclusive messages, plain language is so much more encompassing. Otherwise, what happens is we'll end up having to be a middle point, right? Your message, and then someone having to filter your message so that it reaches the next person, right? So you just want to be able to speak clearly and plainly.
Right. And I would think that that's an area where your PR background, I'm sure, has helped speak to that for you, because I think that is one of the things in PR writing and communication is clear. Business writing is different from academic writing, for example, like that. So I would think that would be a strong connection of PR and the work that you're doing.
For sure. And I mean, even just like the idea of concise language. Now Paula knows my grammar's always been off, and it still is. I am not the most grammatically correct writer. However, what I do think I do well is getting to the point. I don't like super long emails. I find, a lot of times when people are trying to request something or like pull you in, they give you the whole spiel, but it's like, you're having to like dive in, and it's just a lot of brain power. So the idea of a well-crafted message, even an email, right? Are you bolding things properly? Are you keeping it simple? If they can just read about it later or somewhere else, can you just provide a link, right? Like if you want full project overview, go here. And that again increases the speed that people are able to say, I'm interested and available to continue working on this aspect of the project with you. So don't underestimate clear, concise, like plain language. Maybe work on your grammar if you can, but that's the best way to get your point across.
Yeah, no, and when you refer to Paula, you're talking a former professor of yours, and
Yes.
who happens I happen to be married to, and so, um, and yeah, we've had many conversations on the difference between, clear and concise business writing and academic writing. For example, in business writing, there are no be that as it may, or that those sort of more verbose statements. It's to the point. It's very informative, and plain language. Don't use more complicated terms when more simpler language will do. Um, and I really agree with your example of the email or the communication of providing the summary. That's a big deal that I've always thought, is that many will communicate. They'll forward an email and they'll say, for your information, please advise, and then they'll attach like a string of 20 emails that you have to somehow look through and see what the issue is and pick out, and in order to kind of understand what they were asking for, as opposed to take a few minutes and just put in the email. What I'm looking for is, the issue is X, Y, and Z, and I need your input on that. And just to sort of bring it up to the top, is you're being very, very helpful to the person, and by demonstrating very clearly what the issue is, without having them, if they want to read through the 20 emails, fine, but you're bringing that forward to them. That to me is effective communication.
Well, and it's respectful communication too, right? Frankly, we're all busy. We've got lots of things that we're juggling, and putting that sort of psychic load on people to have to literally, they have to, like, it's like a mystery, right? Where they're having to translate and they're sifting through messages. Like, you've now actually created a lot of space in their head, and it might not be the most positive space that you've put them in, right?
Right.
So I really try to think of it that way too, is clear, concise communication is respectful. And again, it's a way of building a positive relationship. When someone reads what you're writing, are they having to decipher you, or do they understand you right off the bat? It's going to change how they operate with you.
Yeah, and it is again that putting yourself in their place. Or as if you write your message, you're about to send the email. Let's say we're talking email. You're about to send it. Just read it from their point of view and say, would I know how to answer this if I didn't know what I know, if I knew what they knew? And if the answer is no, then rewrite it.
Yeah.
But to me, it's common sense. But at a lot of times in this sort of sphere, this area, it's not always common. Like there is a lot of really just toss something over the fence, like the email goes over the fence. Okay, now you've got it. You can do the mystery. Like I like your mystery analogy of you can solve the mystery. And it's not effective because they might come to a different conclusion. They might start to look at something completely different than you're asking for. So it's just a waste of everyone's time. So that's true. So I guess lastly, I guess the one thing that you were saying in our preamble was making logical connections, I think, between needs and wants. And I was just wondering what you were thinking on the, what when you say make logical connections, what do you tell me what you think about that?
Yeah, so that's kind of like the foundational piece of the speak their language. So I've found that public relations and project management have really helped me kind of fine tune that ability to find common ground between not just me and one other person, but several people. So in this role that I have now and my past few roles, I've worked at organizations that have multiple stakeholders. They're kind of like hub networks in the nonprofit space. So it isn't just about communicating effectively with one person, but how do you get a group of 8 professionals at a table working on something, contributing time, energy, funds to projects. So when you are building your agenda, when you are pitching these ideas to people and you're pulling people in closer, it makes good sense that you would want to take a look at their website, take a look at their strategy documents that they might have sent along in previous emails, understand their mission, their vision, similar to how when you're applying for a job and you look at the tasks that they want and you reflect that in your resume and in your cover letter. You're going to do the same when you're trying to build projects with other people who don't have to be on that project with you, right? So I hope that part is clear, is that with these examples that I'm doing is I'm connecting with people who are not obligated to work with me. I'm asking them to join me. And so again, if you can make it very easy, not just for the person that you want to work on a project with you, but are you making it easy for them to talk to their boss about it? Right? Is it matching their strategy? What's the newsworthy item of working on this project with you? Is this the first ever, youth strategy of this nature in your region? Is there something tasty that they can tell their boss about? Is it talking to current trends and themes in your community or in your sector? That is the way to pull people in and to have an enjoyable experience with them.
Yeah, no, that's an awesome point. And it's a key skill, or and again, it's similar to what you said before about flexing your muscle in a certain. I think we were talking about relationship building, but the same thing here, which is making those logical connections. It's almost, if you have the ability to, there's tons of information out there. Like, we're barraged with stuff, like news every day and lots of different points of view and all kinds of social media and all this stuff. We're awash in stuff but if you can make those connections, and say, well, this is what we're trying to do. These are our priorities. This is what you can, you can go and back and sell to your organization or so on, and make those, if you can summarize, distill, it's a really important thing. And that is some of the, I think, comes from your background, comes from just some of your, probably you have some inherent skill in this area, but it's something to work on. I've often said that what I've like project management and PR, and by the way, Paula and I have had many discussions about the, her specialty is PR and mine is project management, PM, but the overlap between the two is incredible. And in both disciplines, this ability, this skill is big. Like in my field, like in project management, I've often referred to, like, if my job has been to bring sort of order to chaos, order to chaos. Like, the start of the project is all chaos. We could do a million things. We could go off in 10 different directions, but now let's figure out what is the direction we're going on. Who is going to work on it? What are we going to accomplish? Like, if you can do that, it's key. And that's I think that's part of what you're saying, which is the making those connections and being able to help people see them.
Exactly. Yeah. Big picture down to the nitty gritty. I think being able to have that sort of like telescopic vision is such a key skill that you can fine tune in the PR program and in your career. And that will only, serve to make your experience more enjoyable and just feel a lot more natural. If you can use that vision, right, to see your projects come to life.
Yeah, no, big picture, and then telescope and so on. I've used the analogy before of, you need to be like the eagle flying, at I don't know how high they fly, but way high in the sky. But then they can drop down to low levels at times. Right. Usually is to get some mouse or something. But we'll stop the analogy at that point. But they can work at both levels, and that is a key thing. You need to be able to see the big picture. Look at the flip analogies for a second. Look at the forest, but then be able to focus on a few trees. When you need to. So. Anyways, Lily, this has been a great discussion. It's been a pleasure talking to you and finding out about your your background in PR and all the wonderful things that you're doing. It sounds like you're doing some amazing things, and with youth and with all these initiatives, and it sounds like some great work that you're doing.
Thanks so much for having me, Dave. It's been a treat. I hope that the PR students can glean a couple of insights from our chat today. And of course, if anyone wanted to reach out to me, you just let them know that I'm available. And yeah, hope that you have a good rest of your day.
Okay. Thanks again.
Thanks for listening to this conversation with Lily Viggiano. It was a pleasure talking to Lily and hearing about all the great things that she is doing for such worthy causes. Her story is a reminder that striving to be authentic and investing in true relationship building will pay itself back many times over. I'm expecting that she will continue to do great things in the future. If you like what I'm doing here, please consider following Understanding Projects on your favorite podcast catcher or subscribing on YouTube. Thanks for listening.